Welcome to the year 1982 in Spider-Man comics. I am your host, Eric Toribio, and I will be reviewing your comics this evening. Last year in The Amazing Spider-Man, we left off with a story about a guy named the Red Ghost who can teleport and has 3 superpowered monkeys. And he gets into a fight with Spider-Man while trying to go about his evil deeds. And then he manages to escape before Spider-Man can put the kibosh on him. Now, in the first issue of the year in Amazing Spider-Man, number 224, called Let Fly These Aged Wings. Adrian Toomes, best known as the Vulture, finds his strength and motivation and breaks out of the hospital where he's undergoing physical therapy. He starts robbing tons of stores. Peter is being upstaged at the Bugle by a new full-time photographer called Lance Bannon. Spider-Man can't find the Vulture, so decides to just go to the Restwell nursing home for dinner with Aunt May. Turns out that the Vulture is hiding out there as just another old man, and then Peter makes a change into Spider-Man and fights the Vulture, but then the Vulture gets away. Like usual. And then in the next issue, 225, Fools Like Us. 2 FBI agents are trying to capture a guy called the Fool Killer, and he's a guy who, you guessed it, kills fools. His mission is to rid the world of fools, and, well, he shows up and vaporizes the 2 agents with a fancy gun. He goes after the registrar of ESU then, but Spider-Man stops him. But the Fool Killer escapes. Then he goes after the entire mailroom of ESU for being horrible at delivering campus mail. And then Spider-Man stops him again, and this time actually captures him. And this was actually a really cool issue, especially the reveal of who the Fool Killer was, because it brought together a lot of little things that started happening a while ago. Like last year, maybe the year before that even. I don't know. But a while back, there was a new student at ESU who started attending Peter's class. His name is Greg Salinger, or Salinger. One time, Peter saw 2 guys roughing him up and changed into Spidey and went after the guys, and they turned out to be FBI agents, questioning him about something. Remember the beginning of this issue where the 2 FBI agents got killed? Anyway, then in the previous issue of Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter got a random spider sense tingle when Greg was around. And then the same thing happened again in this issue. And then after hearing from Deb that Greg called her a fool, Peter put 2 and 2 together, and his assumptions were correct when he pulled the Fool Killer's mask off at the end, and it was Greg Salinger. So yeah. Alright, Spectacular Spider-Man, where we left off last year. Spider-Man beat up some evil lady and demolished a building in the process. Peter and Marcy hint at a possible future relationship. Alright, and then the first issue of this year, 62, Gold Fever. Now, there's something I don't get about the beginning of this issue before I get into it. There's a bunch of gold being delivered to ESU, and specifically to Peter Parker for an experiment he's trying to do at the school. And he hangs on a wall as Spider-Man to get pictures for the Daily Bugle, which makes him late to actually showing up to pick up these gold bars and start the experiment. Couldn't he have just stayed as Peter Parker and gotten there on time or early, and then just taken the pictures as Peter? Then nobody would be mad at him for being late, and he would still be able to get the pictures. Whatever. On with it. Peter is working on an experiment to see the effects of radiation on gold. And then a villain who calls himself Goldbug breaks in and steals the irradiated gold and takes it to the Maggia to try and strike a deal. Spider-Man shows up at their meeting and lets them know that the gold is irradiated, and if they touch it, they will die. They all touched it. Goldbug gets knocked into the water, and his gold suit weighs him down too much, and he drowns. Or at least that's what Spider-Man thinks. I'm sure he'll be back in some form somewhere. And all the Maggia members are sent to the hospital. The next issue, number 63, called Firebug. A not yet open hospital starts burning down. Spider-Man finds footprints melted into the concrete, and he suspects Molten Man and tracks down Liz and Harry Osborn in New Jersey. And Molten Man is Liz's stepbrother, if you are not familiar. Molten Man is already there, and him and Spider-Man fight for a while until Spider-Man knocks him into the pool where all the water evaporates and leaves Molten Man in his original, simply metal-skinned form, no longer burning at hundreds of degrees. So that's good. And then, in Amazing Spider-Man, number 226, But the Cat Came Back. The Black Cat escapes from the mental hospital and apparently wasn't crazy at all, but just acted that way to have an easy escape. She can't stop thinking about Spider-Man and then asks him to meet up. During their rendezvous, she says she'll abandon her life of crime and then invites him to a costume party that's really an underworld meeting. Spider-Man shows up at the costume party, Luke Skywalker style, from Return of the Jedi, in the hood and everything so that nobody can see who he is. And then him and Black Cat wreck all the criminal scum in the place. And they watch the police handle the webbed up baddies from the roof and then kiss. And I must say, I can't blame Spider-Man for being crazy about the Black Cat. There's just something about her. I love Black Cat, and I have always thoroughly enjoyed all the issues that she's showed up in. They better put her in one of the movies soon. It'd be good. Next issue, number 227, Going Straight. Spider-Man and Black Cat meet and discuss their possible future together, and Black Cat going straight and giving up her life of burglary. He nearly dumps her cold right then and there for merely proposing the idea of stealing one last thing for their nest egg. And as much as she loves him, though, she can't help herself and tries the job anyway. Spider-Man shows up to the job and tries to stop her. They set off the alarms and flee without the valuable gem, and then Spider-Man gets shot in the leg. Black Cat runs away from Spider-Man, and he is in hot pursuit. She makes it to the pier, and then he webs her up, and she decides to roll in the water and die rather than go to jail. He dives in after her, but can't find her in the murky water. Yet another death of another woman he loves. But she's probably not dead, as most people usually aren't. Spectacular Spider-Man, number 64, Cloak and Dagger. A team of superpowered individuals who call themselves Cloak and Dagger kill a man who used to be a pharmacist for the mob. A while back, this pharmacist was hired by the mob to create a new drug that would make kids get really addicted to it. They tested it in an abandoned warehouse on Ellis Island on a bunch of runaway kids. All of the kids died painful deaths except for 2. Those 2 somehow had a reaction with the drug that turned them into Cloak and Dagger. Cloak can teleport and create an illusion of complete darkness, Cloak can teleport and transport people into the dimension of darkness. And then Dagger can throw daggers made out of light that turn your blood to ice. No big deal. Then they go after all the other mob members involved with the experiments, and they kill them. Spider-Man is left in the dark. No pun intended, but I found this story to be very dark. in a good way. It was a little stomach-turning when they had the flashbacks to the drug testing, and there was a decently sized body count in this issue. Cloak and Dagger are like a super-powered Punisher team. Pretty crazy. Anyway, Spectacular Spider-Man number 65. The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Kraven again seeks to defeat Spider-Man with the help of his love, Calypso. While Kraven and Spider-Man are fighting, Calypso shoots a drugged dart into Spider-Man's ankle that causes him to hallucinate and see terrifying imagery. Kraven is upset that his defeat of Spider-Man is only due to drugs and scolds Calypso, and then Spider-Man jumps off the roof, still disoriented. Kraven doesn't want Spider-Man to die like this because he wouldn't feel honorable. And then he jumps off after him, and a police car comes by, and Kraven is arrested. Spider-Man flees, and the drugs begin wearing off. So, issue number 228 of The Amazing Spider-Man, Murder by Spider. Some guy has developed a device that lures spiders to a specific area and then causes them to get really angry and bite some unlucky victim to death. And when he finds out this device also affects Spider-Man, he builds a bigger one to lure him and kill him. But obviously Spider-Man gets the better of him and the police come and get him. And I must say the art was outstanding in this issue, and it was not done by John Romita Jr. Maybe it's just the new style. Maybe he just started something that a lot of the other artists are now going to try and start doing. Because I hope so, because it's pretty good. Pretty awesome. I like it. Alright, the next issue of Amazing Spider-Man, number 229, Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut. This story is largely considered one of the top 5 or 10 Spider-Man stories ever. Look up any list online, like any best of Spider-Man list, and almost every single one will have this story on it, and it's usually pretty high up there. Alright, what it's about. The Juggernaut's employer wants Madame Web for her psychic abilities. Juggernaut walks off the boat and starts walking to her apartment in a direct, straight line. He breaks through buildings, knocks cars out of the way. The title does not lie. Nothing, absolutely nothing, slows him down. He just walks through everything. And Madame Web gets a vision of this and contacts Spider-Man, and Spider-Man can't do anything to stop him, no matter how hard he tries. Juggernaut picks Madame Web up out of her life support chair, and she goes into convulsions. Spider-Man tells him she'll die if not in that chair. Juggernaut drops her and says she's no good to him dead and walks away. Spider-Man gets furious, and an ambulance takes Madame Web to the hospital. Continued in issue number 230, to fight the unbeatable foe. Spider-Man then goes after the Juggernaut for vengeance after he nearly killed Madame Web. Juggernaut nears the pier where his boat is waiting. Spider-Man takes a tanker truck and then drives it directly into the Juggernaut, but jumping out before impact. And it explodes fantastically. The Juggernaut just walks out of the wreckage on fire, Terminator style. Spider-Man leaps onto his back and covers Juggernaut's eyes. Juggernaut gives him the pounding of a lifetime until he discovers that he stepped in wet cement on a construction site. Spider-Man watches him sink all the way to the bottom. Then Peter visits Madame Web in the hospital, but she's had some memory loss due to brain damage and doesn't recognize him. And I must say, I can definitely agree that this is one of the top 5 or 10 stories that I've read so far. It's just really, really awesome. Like, the Juggernaut is really crazy and amazing. Spectacular Spider-Man number 66. Electro will be free. Electro breaks out of prison in a scene reminiscent of Ernest Goes to Jail. Slightly different, but close enough for a comparison. And I wanted to just get an Ernest reference in there somewhere. He begins terrorizing the city, but Spider-Man catches up with him. After getting the shock of a life, literal shock as in electrocution, Spider-Man goes home and makes a new suit out of rubber that can withstand the shock. He then goes and defeats Electro. Pretty good issue, lots of crazy destruction. Man, this month of, or two of, issues, people really got their fill of destruction and chaos. Pretty awesome. Alright, then issue number 67, Boomerang, the killer who keeps coming back. A villain called Boomerang who uses boomerangs once into Kingpin's organization. The Kingpin doesn't like him very much and says if he can defeat Spider-Man that he'll let him in. The Kingpin knows Boomerang will fail, and he does, spectacularly. No pun intended. Issue number 68. Hell hath no fury, like a robot scorned. Apparently, when Professor Strom died, his coffin went into an underground laboratory where his brain was uploaded to a robotic version of himself that he'd made earlier. Spider-Man destroys some robots and then destroys Strom's robot itself. Deb Whitman also suspects Peter of being Spider-Man. Yikes. Issue 231 of Amazing Spider-Man, Caught in the Act. Ned Leeds and Marla Madison, the Daily Bugle reporter and Jonah Jameson's girlfriend, respectively, go to interview a snitch for info about the Brand Corporation. During their encounter, Cobra shows up, thinking the guy's giving dirt about him and tries to kill him. Spider-Man shows up and beats the crap out of Cobra, and as he's carrying him off to the police station, a villain called Mr. Hyde shows up and wants Cobra for revenge. Peter also sews a new Spidey suit in this issue, one with the big, giant underarm webbing that was in the early issues of Spider-Man. It's been going for a while now, and I liked that. I didn't really even notice it that much, that it changed, because it was such a subtle change over time. But I think it must have been late 70s or 1980, 1981, when the webbing completely disappeared, but for a really long time the webbing was just very, very small. It was barely noticeable in some panels and just missing completely in others. But now it's back, and it looks really stupid. Not gonna lie. It literally goes from here all the way down to the bottom of the rib cage, or maybe the top of the waist, whatever. It's ridiculous and stupid. Anyway, the next issue, number 232, Hyde in Plain Sight. Mr. Hyde fights Spider-Man to get Cobra. Spider-Man throws Cobra to Hyde and then goes to clean out his stuff from his cubicle at the school, which he has to do by 5 p.m. At this point, I should mention that yes, Mr. Hyde is the same one as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, although he's a little more powerful. Well, a lot more. And his alter ego isn't Jekyll, it's Calvin Zabu. So, yeah. Anyway, Spider-Man catches up with Hyde and Cobra at Cobra's apartment and manages to knock Hyde out the wall and down onto the street, knocking him out. Cobra gets taken by the police. Issue 69 of Spectacular Spider-Man is In Darkness Seldom Seen. Cloak and Dagger are back and taking down drug dealers who are selling cocaine and heroin to little kids. These Spider-Man comics can get really hardcore sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. They learn that the person behind all this selling drugs to kids business is Silvermane, who's in bed with many broken bones. Spider-Man and Cloak and Dagger go to Silvermane and fight off his goons. Cloak then coaxes Dagger to kill Silvermane with her daggers of light, and she does. All the while, Spider-Man tries to convince them to call the police instead of murdering Silvermane. And I'll just say that Cloak and Dagger are really awesome. Like, really awesome. And I really hope that Marvel follows through with making a movie about them. Let me reiterate here. Cloak is a black guy who has a giant cape and can teleport and also send people into the dimension of darkness. And Dagger can create daggers out of light that will freeze your blood. Then issue number 70, The Great Cloak and Dagger Hunt. Silvermane is put into a bionic body, and he immediately goes hunting for Cloak and Dagger. Spider-Man fights him along the way, but eventually they catch up with them. Cloak envelops a runaway subway train in his darkness and gets too weak to fight. Then Dagger finishes off Silvermane. Deborah stresses over the fact that Peter is Spider-Man. And then issue 233 of Amazing Spider-Man, where the expletive is Nose Norton. Yes, it's @ symbol, cent sign, percentage sign, number sign is the expletive there. That's part of the title. And they start using that kind of thing a lot more, especially with Jameson, for profanities that they can't show in the comics. But anyway, the informant with info about the Brand Corporation from a few issues back, called Nose Norton, has disappeared. Jameson wants the dirt and offers $1,500 bonus to the first person at the Bugle who finds him. Ben Urich finds out where he is, and Spider-Man follows him and catches up to him as Peter Parker, asking if they want to team up, takes pictures and stuff, whatever. When they get to Nose Norton, Tarantula attacks, hired to kill or kidnap him. Spider-Man fights him and supposedly defeats him. There are shots on the pier. Spider-Man comes back to find 2 detectives and a dying Nose Norton. The detectives say the Nose shot first. Also, now Tarantula's gone. Hopefully, Peter's roll of film will answer some questions about the whole stinky affair. Issue number 234 of Amazing Spider-Man. Now shall Will-o'-the-Wisp have his revenge. Will-o'-the-Wisp goes around destroying brand factories. Spider-Man investigates the one in Queens, and while observing one of the rooms through the vents, he sees Tarantula being let in and put into some kind of liquid in a tank, with talk of making him like Spider-Man. Spider-Man busts in and starts busting heads. Will-o'-the-Wisp comes in and tries to destroy all the machinery, but gets into a fight with Spider-Man. Then Tarantula emerges from his bath looking like a giant spider with big hairy arms and legs. Issue number 235. Look out, there's a monster coming. Will-o'-the-Wisp and Tarantula fight their way into the East River. Everyone thinks they've drowned. Peter thought he would have great photos to sell Jameson, but they're all ruined. And the government wants Jameson to kill the expose he's doing on the Brand Corporation because it might give them a chance to cover up things before the government can get evidence on them. Spider-Man goes to James Melvin's house, the head honcho at Brand, to investigate. Will-o'-the-Wisp shows up and tries to kill Melvin for turning him into Will-o'-the-Wisp. Spider-Man stops him. Melvin gets away, but then he comes back in the arms of the Tarantula Beast. That is the last issue of the year for Amazing Spider-Man, so leave you in a little suspense. Alright, issue number 71 of Spectacular Spider-Man. With this gun, I thee kill. An anti-gun PSA. Peter, Lance, and Robbie discuss in great lengths the gun rights. Spider-Man goes to Brooklyn docks and stops a shipment of illegal guns from entering the city. Issue number 72. Waiting for Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock escapes from jail, and then some genius kid who worships Dr. Octopus makes tentacle arms like his, but not nearly as strong or sturdy, and he goes out and robs a comic store and a toy store. Spider-Man catches up to him and fights him in the dark toy store thinking it's Doc Ock, and then eventually he figures out that it's just some kid, and the kid is all scared about his parents finding out about it and sending him to reform school, and then Spider-Man shows some mercy and doesn't turn him in. The kid then throws out his Doc Ock stuff and begins looking up to Spider-Man instead. Deb Whitman talks to her psychiatrist and thinks she's crazy. She tells him that she thinks Peter is Spider-Man. Issue number 73. Peter Parker, you are the spectacular Spider-Man. Deb's psychiatrist asks Peter to pretend to be Spider-Man to help her. And then, during his hearing, Boomerang tries to escape. Being there taking pictures, Peter changes into Spider-Man and stops him. He then follows some spider-sense tingling gentlemen to a museum where he finds the Owl plotting to take over as Overlord of Crime in New York. His partner in this is Dr. Octopus, and won't have a partnership and betrays the Owl. Spider-Man breaks up the party and fights with both the Owl and Doc Ock. Both of them escape as he's fighting their goons. And from the cover, I thought Wolverine was going to be in this issue. But as it turns out, the guy that I thought was Wolverine was in fact the Owl. And guess what? The Owl looks exactly like Wolverine. Well, if Wolverine dressed like a British person from the 1800s. He even has 3 retractable claws on top of his wrist. Please. I guess they're supposed to be talons, but it was just all very disappointing because I was hoping to see some Wolverine action. Anyway, The Amazing Annual, 1982. Who's that lady? A woman named Lieutenant Rambeau goes on some unauthorized mission to Roxxon oil rig, and something goes wrong with some equipment and something about energy and some hole in the air and universes, and she turns into Captain Marvel. She has too much energy, and if it goes untreated long enough, she'll explode like an H-bomb. And Spider-Man, of course, mistakes her for a villain and follows her to the Avengers Mansion, where Iron Man manages to channel her excess energy through his suit and shoots powerful beams into the sky, and then all is safe again. And there was no annual issue for Spectacular Spider-Man, so that's it. I would say it was a pretty good year. I definitely really liked a lot of the issues, and of course it had one of the all-time classics, Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut. I would highly recommend that one. It was just a pretty good year, and some of the classic stuff is coming up in the next few years, so get ready for that. See you next time in 1983.